I don't start until you start talking, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So can everyone real quick wave if you didn't already?
Hmm?
Just wave real quick.
Oh, sorry.
Bang! The popular term used by sports gamblers when they hit a bet. Well, gambling is an industry that is on the rise and will continue to grow for years to come. Today, I will be persuading you that sports gambling should be legalized. Well, see, sports gambling is a topic that many people don't think is important or too minuscule to talk about. But today, I'm here to tell you that it is an important topic and can actually have a lot to do with what you want to do money-wise, and is important for all sports terms and just people in general. During my high school and college years, I learned a lot about sports as my passion, but I also got very interested in the gambling community. Not because I was obsessed with gambling, but because it was an interesting trend and I wanted to learn a lot more about it. So today I'm here with all the information I've learned to persuade you why it should be legalized. During this speech, I will give you 3 reasons as to why it should be legalized. Those 3 reasons include because I think that it increases social life, it boosts the economy, and it gives people the power to do whatever they want with their own money, as anyone should be able to. First off, I would like to talk about the social media trends that have to do with increasing social life, but also it includes the negative aspects of online threats and violence that have to do with gambling. See, when we look at social media sites such as Twitter and Instagram, we see that Twitter has a lot of dialogue back and forth between people that concerns with threats and violence when we talk about gambling. It is also important to note that there are a lot of mobile apps such as FanDuel, Barstool, and DraftKings that have a lot to do with gambling sites and can also provide a lot of online threats and violence towards each other. Although these gambling sites have some threats, it is important to note that there's one common theme in all of them, and it's sports. People get together, they put in bets, and they just want to have fun. Me and my friends have used these sports apps before, and the major thing about them is they just want to have fun, and they're not concerned. If you're educated and you have fun, it's a safe place. I will talk about a creator in which I spend a lot of my time focusing on. His name is Book It with Trent. Trent is a famous gambler that has started only a year ago. He got very popular on a streaming service called Twitch, and he also uses Twitter. He posts his picks there, and it is very important to note that he doesn't just post these picks and get a negative reaction, but it's a very positive reaction. He increases social life tremendously by moving out to LA, and he's got very close with new people in his life, and he's got very close with popular streamers, gamblers, and even famous people. We have learned through Trent that there can be a positive gambling community, and it doesn't have to be negative. All of his comment sections are positive, and if there are negative comments, it tends to fuel his fire and make him do better. So now that I've talked about Trent, that doesn't mean it's for everybody. But there are also a lot of online gamblers that get a lot of hate towards them. But we can learn from this, and even though there's hate, we can learn to channel the hate and become better people and just learn to live with the losses that we take and be happy for the wins. Now that I've talked about the problems and I've talked about how to increase your social life, I'll talk about the solution to the threats and the problem. The easy solution is education. We learn in school about some of these topics, including mathematics, science, that not everyone needs to use in their daily life. But there are more important things such as money and gambling that we need to learn more about that you could actually have your life matter for. So for example, when we talk about how it could make your life better and it could actually boost the economy in more ways than normal. So for example, the NCAA talks about how the economy is boosted not only by students, but actually also by everyone in the whole world. So as I talked about before, the education perspective of gambling is important as there are student-led groups in the NCAA that talk about how they can manage to teach people about gambling, but not just to students who want to learn about gambling, but to everybody. This is a class that you can learn from, that you can help people, and it just makes it better. Education has been proven to work. We have seen education work as the economy has boosted. According to an Oxford report, the US economy in 2017 made $11.6 to $14.2 billion in the past year. That includes the only states that are legalized. Do you know how many states there are illegalized? And imagine what the number could be if they were all legalized? Well, have that number. According to a peer-reviewed journal by Victor Matheson, he talks about how if every state was legalized, there would be 32, or if every state was legalized, there would be $32 billion in profit. That is more than double the amount it has right now. Although we talk about how there's a solution, that doesn't mean that it can be attainable so easily. I will now move on to the third topic, which is how you can purchase it, how you can use your own money to purchase things with your you can use your own money to purchase things. So I would like to visualize the perfect world. In 10 to 20 years, imagine if every state was perfect, right? We imagine, everyone could go to the casino, put in their gambling, put in their bets. Well, it still needs to have laws and restrictions in place. Just because it's the perfect world and there's, everything's legalized, doesn't mean there still needs to be restrictions. People can't just go freely and use their own, money for whatever they want. According to a report by Spencer Bocat Lindell, he talks about how there are people who illegally use gambling websites. And that's true. There are a lot of people that use gambling websites illegally. But that's never going to change. And it's important to note that that's never going to change. So we might as well legalize it. I would like to now zoom in on one person in particular. And I'd like to tell the story of them. And that person is myself. I got into gambling around 12th grade when a bunch of my friends did it. It was fun, and I was always careful with my money because I was educated, as I mentioned before. It's important to note that when I was gambling, I was always educated, I always knew what to talk about, but it is somewhat addicting. But if you have the education, you can channel the addiction and make it better. It was not until my freshman year of college when I realized how much I was addicted to it. It wasn't because I was losing money, it was just that I was always on the app and always looking up statistics. I was always going up and down, and it never was a matter of I was losing too much, winning too much. But on December 31st, one day in particular, I put a $20 bet on New Year's Eve and put my phone down. I woke up that next day and realized I had $500 in my bank account. That's crazy to me. I just went from $20 to $500. Now, the big picture is the ups and downs of gambling is important, but the moral of the story is if you are educated and you're confident in what you do, it doesn't matter how much money you win or lose. It just matters about having fun, and there really is no problem towards it. See, we mentioned in a perfect world how everything is legalized and it doesn't matter what you do, but it matters when there are gun violence and there's other violence, but that's legalized. So sports gambling doesn't kill anyone. So why is it illegal? It doesn't make sense to me. It shouldn't make sense to anyone else. As I have now mentioned the three topics, I will now move on to the conclusion. In conclusion, I want to talk about how I want to ask states to look over this law and reconsider their judgment on it. I've gone through multiple states and realized that their policy shouldn't be this way, and it's very frustrating to watch and sit through all these decision makings when it really shouldn't be this way. Imagine winning a bet in Vegas, sitting at home and realizing, wow, this is a lot of fun. I want to do this more often. Well, I do that, and it happened in my $500 bet. So I hope that you would take this information, share it with everyone, and move on and just make it legal. That's all it needs to be, it's legal. So I appreciate that, and now I will now have a 2-minute Q&A.
Elijah,
Yeah.
how many states are actually legal? How many states are there?
So currently it's actually always changing. So it's about like less than 20% of states, but Massachusetts just recently became the state that legalized, which to the joy of many, it's now legal, but it's around 20%. I don't know the exact number, but it's around 20%. Yeah.
What do you think are some of the steps that the country should or would take to make it legal?
Yeah, so I think that, of course, I mentioned before, education is the most important. I think classes are important, educating people on just how to use money correctly. I think that's the most important step the country can take. But other than that, I think it just comes down to the person and how self-aware they are of them. If you're going down too much, you need to stop. If you're going up too much, obviously, it means you're doing well. But, there's a point where you need to stop, take a moment and realize where you're at. I think it's really self-reflection. Yeah.
Do you know the demographics of who participates in gambling? If men participate more than women or certain races participate more than others?
Yeah, so what I found actually, there's a study that I saw according to the National Council of Problem Gambling, that 75% of students partake in gambling. That didn't discriminate race or gender or whatever, so it's male and female, any race, but 75%, that's a pretty big number, but I do believe that in the large grand scheme of things, males are more prone to gambling, more money, they lose more money. But I think 75% of students is a very large number. Yeah.
So I've noticed sometimes when I watch the news or I play fantasy football that sometimes players like to bet on themselves, which is not allowed. Is that something that should be implemented as a regulation if gambling is legalized, or do you think that's something that should still remain prohibited?
Yeah, so I think it's a tough subject because I think it's prone to, the league matter. But I've seen players get suspended for doing it. Recently we saw a player get suspended the entire year for gambling on themselves. I think that restrictions need to be made, but I think if they're not playing and if it's for a different team, I don't see a huge issue with the gambling on it. But again, there needs to be restrictions being made because it is a problem if you're betting on yourself or you're betting against yourself. That's when like fixes come in, and that's when you get the question of, is it cheating, is he not, all that kind of stuff. So if anyone have any more questions, so if that's it, I appreciate it. Thank you for your time.